our final week of Decisions of Fate. Hope nobody is stuck at Federation trying to figure out how to get through those front doors, huh? But we're here. Okay. So, dear friends, Decisions of Fate, and we have our final lesson, which, it's interesting. Last week we spoke about the beginning of life, the fetus. And this week we're going to speak about end of life, but it's really about the body. The human body is the hero of today's class, the body itself. And the question of the body, per se, really kicks in at the moment of death. The moment of death is when the soul leaves the body. Now we have a human body which once was alive, and now it is no more alive. And the question is, there's all types of questions. Organ donation, doing an autopsy, what other types of things? Cadavers, which is when bodies get donated for medical research purposes. And there are these specific cases that we're going to be talking about over here, but it's really a question. Hello, Dr. Craig. Come on in. You need a book?
Yeah.
Mushki.
I looked. I couldn't find it.
You couldn't find it. I'll give you one more. I'll give you one more strike. Mushki, it's in the box there.
The last class,
Last class, you got to have a book. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Doing good. We got a place for you.
Okay, back to the book.
Okay, there you go. Okay. All right. We can also co-present.
Sure.
You be my co-presenter.
Oh yeah, of course.
Mint condition over here.
Sure. Oh, thank you so much.
There you go. Wonderful. All right. It's all about giving us an understanding of how Judaism views the human body. So, dear friends, let us begin like this. Tonight's topic is a body's dignity. I apologize, I don't have as big of a screen as the Jewish Federation. Okay. So, a body's dignity. Let's begin with our case study. And I need somebody who could do a little bit of a nice amount of reading. Dr. Craig, you're a doctor. You want to do a little bit of a heavier read over here?
Sure.
Okay. So whenever you're ready, we got an hour and a half over here, so no rush. Whenever you're ready.
What page?
Page 118. This is a pretty recent news story out of Texas, and it'll give us what to think about over here. So let us do this.
Introduction.
No, straight to the case study.
I'll go right to the case study? Okay. In the anatomy lab at the University of North Texas Health Science Center at Fort Worth, medical students interact with what some consider their very first patients, dead people who more often than not chose to donate their bodies to science through the school's Wild Body program. They provide the repetition that leads to competence for students who will one day treat living patients. But about 1 in 4 cadavers belong to those the county calls unclaimed people whose families couldn't afford or chose not to provide funeral services, or those whose next of kin couldn't be found. Not only has the program saved Tarrant County hundreds of thousands of dollars in its first 3 years alone, it's provided a more diverse donor pool from which students can learn. Keep going.
Let's keep on going. You got a long article there.
Texas law, I'll read faster. Texas law requires each county's commissioner's court to care for the bodies of people who can't afford funeral arrangements. An Attorney General opinion in 2000 noted the language allows the county to donate the body to a medical facility. Before contracting with the Health Science Center, Tarrant County offered burials or cremations at no cost to the person's family, according to Lisa Martin, director of the Tarrant County Department of Human Services. The expenses cost the county roughly $500,000 a year. After the contract went into effect, those expenses plummeted. The county mostly stopped offering burials, the most costly option, though exceptions for unidentified bodies, veterans, and people with certain religious beliefs remain. Eli Shoup was volunteering at a hospice in Arlington in late 2021 when she learned about the Health Science Center's contract with Tarrant County. A chaplain with whom she made weekly rounds mentioned one patient wouldn't survive much longer. After he died, he'd go to the med school, Shoup said. and I asked what that meant. That's how I learned that this is what happens when you die with no assets. Shoup, a recent transplant to Texas, had earned a PhD in philosophy and was well steeped in the world of donation. This is a long case.
Warned you.
In 2018, she donated one of her kidneys. She now teaches bioethics at UT Arlington.
Should we give somebody else a chance?
Yeah, but I want to just tell people something that
Sure.
I met one of the most altruistic people. She's not Jewish, but of my entire life I had seen her for a skit check. She had a big scar on her back, and I asked her what it was from. She said she donated a kidney. And I said to whom? She says, I have no idea.
Wow.
I,
Wow.
I mean, personally, I could never donate an organ to someone I don't know. I mean, it's truly one of the most amazing stories I've ever heard.
Beautiful.
Somebody needed a kidney in me. She knew what it was. She gave her kidney away. So
And never met the recipient.
No.
Wow.
no.
All right, let's keep on going over here.
You
You'll
saw that today?
I don't know.
Hey.
Okay, who wants to continue reading? Debbie. Debbie's going to continue over there.
Where did we leave off?
Her concerns.
Her concerns with the program were both philosophical and practical. She mulled over consent or lack thereof. People have the right, people have the right to make decisions about their bodies all their lives, she said. The deep philosophical question to ask is that right persist after we die? For sure, the answer is yes. In December, she published a column in the Dallas Morning News critiquing the program. She didn't want to solely offer criticism, so she signed up to one day donate her body to the Health Science Center's program. Consent forms are rounded. If they think it's important for me to sign all those consents, clearly they think the fact that they're making this unpressured, autonomous decision to give their body to me is encouraging, she said. So why do they not make these consents for someone who just happened to have nothing when they died? Alternatives exist. In 2016, New York banned the use of unclean bodies as cadavers. The state's medical school said they would fill any gaps by expanding their programs for private donations. Closer to home, Bexar County provides a simple, respectful, and dignified service for people who can't afford it. Furthermore, some medical schools around the country have decided to avoid cadavers altogether in favor of virtual laboratories. At a minimum, she said, programs like the one at the Health Science Center can make informed decisions about what a person with no assets or next of kin likely will want. For example, the majority of Americans now prefer cremation to burial. But, she said, a vanishingly small number of people choose to donate their own bodies. So the more ethical path is to err on the side of caution. This is uncomfortably close to grave robbery, she said. That's how it seems to me. They just don't go in the ground first. Students aren't necessarily aware that cadavers in the area are going to be unclaimed. Fourth-year medical student Russell Rowe said that as long as the program diligently tried to contact next of kin, and as long as the program approached bodies with respect, he was okay with it. It's a very honorable means, he said. Just because it goes to a good cause, to foster the education of medical professionals as a whole. There are life-saving things that the students are learning and doing, Claudia Gallup of the Health Science Center said. Not just life-saving, but quality of life. To be able to restore that quality of life for others. To be able to get something like that out of a tragic loss. Where nobody's wanted to live life. For me, it's a good thing.
Okay, long story over here. But it's getting some ideas on the table. So I just want to hear your gut feeling. So the state attorney general deduced from the language of the law that actually we don't need to bury. We could even donate these bodies that nobody's claiming. We can't find a relative. And instead of the state having to pay for burial or cremation, we donate them to the medical school. They probably make some money off of it, right? They do. There you go. Still I can. That's great.
And so did the chaplain probably.
Oh, there. So what starts happening is bodies, unclaimed bodies, they're dying and now their bodies are being used for medical research purposes. And we have here a debate. The article gave us some ideas for both sides. What's your gut feeling? Is that wrong? Is that unethical? Is that abusive? Is that...
So nothing.
Or it's unethical. Why in one sentence?
No consent.
No consent. Anybody else? No consent. You're saying if somebody says, I'm gonna die, take my body, gesund hit.
Why don't
That's-
they ask the people before then if they are in the hospital and they are dying and there was a mention who's dying soon? Can they not ask if people volunteer for that?
So that's a good question.
People might not be in a position to answer. Some, but
Someone could die in the street.
right.
Yeah, well, I think the best scenario is somebody dies in the street. A homeless man dies in the street. We have no clue where he comes from, where he's going. There's nobody.
Okay.
So then they're like, okay, instead of us paying for a burial, go and use him as a cadaver. Now they can do medical research. They're saying consent. Okay. Any other reasons why against besides consent? Any other thoughts? And again, gut feeling. We're not going to what Torah says. We'll get there soon.
Not religion?
Not religion. Simply meaning just your own internal gut feeling.
No, so there's no religion behind it. I can't see anything wrong with that.
You're saying, well, so you can't say anything wrong with it. Why not? Which means why? Why would it be an okay thing?
So
Yeah,
where
but
the morals come, what would you derive the morality from?
No, so that's a separate question. But just does it feel right to you? They're taking somebody's body, and you're starting to use it as an asset. You know, schlepping somebody's body around. What was that?
You don't know what their intentions are. You don't know what the person who dies.
Or you can say, well, they're dead. They're just dead. It's
Yeah,
over.
but you don't know what they
I would
want.
argue moral status.
Do you?
You can't. You don't know. So you're saying you go back to consent,
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
You don't know what they want.
and you're saying if there's no consent, then this is a little bit too much to do with the body. Well, so why don't you say that about burial also? There's no consent for burial.
I would
So-
also argue moral consent. Hi, can you hear
Why
me?
would this be uniquely something? Oh, for this we need consent.
There could be no consent between two well-communicating spouses if it hasn't been discussed prior.
But at least there's next of kin who could make the best call. Right. So you're saying, but to do this, you're saying this over burial needs real consent. Why? I think the argument is, come on, you're going to start using a body for 9 months, for a year. You're going to chop it up into pieces. You're going to have people day in, day out dissecting it and touching it. I know this is not very enjoyable stuff to talk about. Nathan, this is the one class you have to crash? You don't care. What's the difference?
I think a lot of what people are. Hi,
We
can you
want to
hear me?
understand the morality of how we treat a body. So we have consent. Any other arguments for or against? Why for? Nobody gave an argument for. Why would it be a good thing?
Because it benefits the society.
Benefit society. What do you mean? Here's somebody, he's dead, he was homeless, and here we're finally giving his life purpose. You know, if we could use such words. He is right now benefiting society. Look at this. A whole generation of medical students in this university are going to have a cadaver. They're going to learn human anatomy. That's an amazing benefit to society. You want to bury him? So what? So that
Somebody's making money off of this, though. That's part of it.
ooh, the fact somebody's making money off of it. But burial homes also make money. Okay.
But
I think making money is harsh. They're not spending money.
They're not oh, it's a cheap option for them, and
It's
therefore
not a cheap option, it's just they have to deal with the body. If they do this, they don't have to pay to deal with the body. So it's not, I think it's harsh to call that cheap.
Well,
It's this expense has been imposed on society.
It's taxes, it's not.
And
Yeah.
then the-
oh, that's a good argument. We're saving taxpayers dollars over here.
Not paying the burial.
Well, it's, I mean, the case said that they donated the cadaver. It didn't say they sold it.
Oh, right. That's true. It did say that they were donated. By the way, there's another argument here which is not mentioned explicitly in the article, although it's touched upon. Who are these people who are being found? These unclaimed people. Who are they generally? If we have to stereotype for a moment.
The fringes of society.
The fringes of society. The very, very poor. The minority groups.
Mentally ill.
Ooh. The argument is, okay, so here comes big government, here comes the big, wealthy, middle class, well-established white people, and they need, for their noble causes of medical scientific advancements, so who do they use out? Who do they use out? The poor, the needy, the minority groups. But then you could say the argument, 1 second. We're benefiting them too. There are certain diseases which are specifically in certain minority groups. This gives the opportunity for us to help them. So the argument goes both ways. But the point is, there's also that sensitivity of, yes.
No, I just want to pose a question. Take the cadaver out of the equation. Let's say you find a bank account with this guy's name. No next of kin, no family, you can't find anybody. What happens to the money?
It's a good question.
Same question, but
Well,
there's no
it goes to the
autopsies going on.
But today we want to talk about the body specifically. Okay.
Where does
Now,
the money go? Are you going to use it to benefit society, or should you just leave it in the bank?
Or are you gonna use it to bury that body and then take the rest of it and benefit
Yeah,
society?
that's
No,
what
but,
it is.
but that's what I'm saying.
There is no way of
If
knowing.
you take the autopsy part out of the equation, the answer is give the money to society.
So you're saying, why don't we treat the body the same way? So you're saying body and money makes no difference.
I'm making the argument.
Meaning it's a way to look at
To
it.
make the argument, I'm making the argument for you.
Yeah, I hear.
Not sure
Yeah,
I'm
you
making
feel.
the argument, but I'm making the
Right. Arguments have to be made whether we hold to them or not.
Right.
Yes.
If we take out the factor of religion and the only problem is consent, does that mean if the person gives consent, we can do whatever we want with the body also?
From a non-religious perspective, somebody says, yes, please donate my body for a cadaver. That
If we
sounds
want to
wonderful.
do anything with the body.
And this is what this Mrs. Shoup said, that she actually tried to do. She wanted to understand what the procedure is, and they gave her a whole pile of papers to sign. Consent. So yeah, meaning from a non-religious perspective, simply societal, someone wants to donate their body, consent. You're
What
good.
if they
Yes.
wanna-
What was that?
My question is, what if they want to do other things with the body also? Sell it for parts.
I'm saying from I don't know exactly, from a Western perspective, if you're not hurting anybody, what I'm saying, we cremate bodies, no problem. You want to do it, consent, you sign a paper, we'll do that. Yeah.
So here's a little more nuance on it. This person with no one to take care of him has a tattoo, is a Holocaust survivor. They know he's Jewish, and they have to do something with the body. So they have a choice of cremation, burial, or donation. And if they have to spend money, they're gonna pick the cremation because it's cheaper, not the burial, which would be the ideal thing. So now when you're left with cremation versus donating for medical, which is more appropriate or
So
needed?
it says clearly in the article that for that religious, that if there's a religious identity, then that would change what they would do.
I was gonna say,
And
if
I believe
it's
that they
clear
would
that
bury
the
it.
man was Jewish,
They would
in
bury
the
it.
sense that if he had been tattooed, I think that they would call the local railway and the local burial society would
Exactly.
probably
Yeah.
bury
The local Chaver Kaddish would probably get that call.
Well,
Yeah.
what if it's not visible?
If it's not visible, then they don't know.
Right.
All right, dear friends.
Right.
But we do have to.
Something else.
We do have to march on forward. We got a case study which helped us get a little bit of got our minds working and thinking.
Be nice.
Okay, so what this touches upon is the sensitivity of what we think and how we think society should be treating a dead body, a corpse. So let us start looking at what Judaism says, and as we're going to see, it starts off seeming pretty simple. But then when we want to start getting down to the nuances of it, to the exceptional situations, it starts becoming a very rich field. So, let's begin seeing what would Judaism say about the whole concept of taking a human body and doing an autopsy, of cutting open a human body for any purpose, I don't know, medical research, determine cause of death, any type of thing. The whole concept of saying, what was that? Solve a crime.
Right.
What does Judaism say about that? So let's begin with text number 1 from the Talmud. Now, let's just take somewhat of the obvious. How recent of a concept is the idea of autopsy?
Old.
Old.
Middle
How
Ages.
old? Middle Ages?
Whatever, before that.
You're saying it's not very recent?
No.
Talmudic times, were they looking to do autopsies? In Talmudic times.
Can you give us a year of what you consider Talmudic times?
From 0 to 500.
No, they
I don't believe we have clearly in the Talmud any direct quotation, specifically speaking about the concept of autopsy. But this is what we do have. Interesting text. So, Marshall, let's begin with you. Text 1, page 123.
Respecting remains. One who transports human bones on donkey may not place them in a leather saddlebag and ride on top of them, for by doing so, one treats them disrespectfully.
There we go. Simple case. Somebody is transporting human bones. Why? Talmud doesn't tell us. Irrelevant. They are transporting human bones. Maybe they're a grave robber. Worst case scenario.
Who robs the grave for bones?
You're saying it too late by that point.
No one. We're robbing for.
They're looking for something.
I don't know. Skulls
The
cut.
same.
I forget it. No, but I'll tell you. A practical reason is, which just happened throughout Europe. All of a sudden, there's a locomotive. Cities and countries want to create. What do they tell the city? Okay, 3 months, right here on the outskirts of the city, we are making a train station. What happens right then? What's on the outskirts of the city?
They dig it up.
The Jewish cemetery. They tell you go complain at City Hall. There's no rights, there's no appeals. We're doing it. If you want to protect your dead, go dig them up. We can't. So all of a sudden, sometimes even very ancient Jewish cemeteries had to be dug up and transported. And there's a whole halachic procedure how to do that. That's a very sensitive situation. Okay, so the fact is there could be some legitimate reasons why somebody will be transporting human bones on a donkey. Okay, says the Talmud something simple. Don't put on the donkey and then sit on top of it. Just don't do that. Why? Treat them with respect. Don't treat them with disrespect. And here we have the Talmudic principle of respect for a corpse, and there's a prohibition against dishonoring a dead body. You see that?
Yeah, just the stand is.
Let me lower it then.
Thank you.
How's that? Okay.
Or I can talk.
What was that?
Or I could just follow.
That's okay. All right. So here we have a principle. Judaism believes a value, and there's a real mitzvah. There's a prohibition. You're not allowed to dishonor and treat with a certain callousness a dead body, bones. Don't treat it like a sack of potatoes. You go shopping to Costco, you put the sack of potatoes in the trunk, no problem. What goes on top of it, what goes under it, nobody cares. But if it's a human body, be careful. Okay. Now, if we want to be simplistic about it, if it is dishonorable, if it's disrespectful to a human body to sit on top of its package, then let me ask you, taking a dead body and cutting into it and cutting into pieces, does that touch upon this issue? What would you say? That's an easy bridge to cross, right? Seemingly, yes. We don't even want to sit on top of the satchel that has the bones for sure not to go and take a knife to it and start cutting it up. Okay. So, it is a pretty simple and easy bridge to cross. There's a general prohibition. We need to honor and be sensitive to a human body. Doing an autopsy does not seem like something that Judaism would be in support of. Okay. What's the obvious question then?
Why?
Here we have it. That's why.
Oh,
No,
okay.
but no. But it's a good question. I shouldn't dismiss that question. That's actually a great question. If we know the why, then we'll be able to answer the most important question, which is, are there any exceptions? We always want to know exceptions. So it's easy to say an elective autopsy. We're just a doctor's like, yeah, why not? Let's now just go and cut him up for whatever. No, that don't do. What if there's a pressing need? What could be the pressing need? Solve a crime case. They died from some specific disease. We want to understand that disease to help protect humanity from... No, there could be lots of good reasons. So the question is, what are the limitations of this rule? And this is classic, like we've done in all the classes. We could have a general principle, but what are the limitations of that principle? How far does it extend? And let's test it at its limits. So that's obviously going to be the question. What are the exceptions to this rule? Would Judaism ever allow an autopsy? And this is where things are getting exciting. You ready? We are going to study two different halachic responses from two different rabbis who lived kind of similar times. And not really. They're a generation apart. Two European rabbis from 200-300 years ago. They both got halachic questions about autopsy. And let's see how they dealt with it. And I just want to share with you what we're about to do, because it's going to be pretty fascinating, and it's going to take a little bit of our brain power over here, all right? These two rabbis give different rationales. As Nathan just asked, why? Explain to me, what are we dishonoring? Why dishonoring? What's the rationale behind this principle? And actually, with different rationales, the application of this principle changes dramatically. Okay? So we're going to see that happening over here. Let's begin with our first rabbi. Let me introduce you to a brand new player. We haven't quoted this rabbi yet in this course. This is a 19th century rabbi in Germany. His name is Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger. Know anybody with the last name Ettlinger? Not neither? Okay. Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger, German rabbi. He gets this question. Let's read text 2, what he, Yechiel. Text 2, page 124.
Was consulted and dissecting emergency. I was consulted regarding the case of a patient who was ill with a unique disease. The doctors treated him, but to no avail. He died of his illness. Another patient suffered from the same illness, and the doctors sought to dissect the body of the deceased person to understand the disease and possibly find a cure for the patient who was still alive. Under such circumstances, is it permissible to desecrate the dead?
Great question. This is now a case where we understand we're not just being callous and flippant and doing an elective autopsy. Now we already have a serious need. Two people suffering from the same disease. One dies, The other one just has a few more days to live, but maybe if we could understand the disease, maybe we could cure it. So let's do an autopsy on the deceased person, try to understand what happened here, and see if we can save the other person. This is a great, great question. This sounds like a question worth testing the limits of this principle of honor the dead. Okay. So Rabbi Ettlinger gets this question. Now, if you read the question, you kind of see the tone of the question. The questioner of the question is on the same page over here. Generally, autopsy is forbidden. But this is a pressing, life-saving situation. Could we make an exception here? Would halacha allow an exception here? Okay. Rabbi Ettlinger starts from a pretty natural place. Well, look, we're trying to save a life over here. What's the Jewish principle when it comes to saving a life? And we've discussed this, I think, in all the previous classes. What happens when it's time to save a life?
It trumps all rules.
All rules off the table. The whole Judaism goes out the window besides the 3 cardinal sins. What are the 3 cardinal sins? Don't murder, no murder, no idolatry, no adultery. Now, autopsy, you're all good. There's no murder going on over here. So, seemingly, it seems reasonable to say that in this case, we're trying to save a life, let's do the autopsy. Why? Even though it's generally prohibited, but we're saving a life, let's do it. So Rabbi Ettlinger says, okay, that's a good argument, but there's a big but. Sounds good in theory, but it's not so simple. Why is it not so simple? Rabbi Ettlinger points us to text 3, which is really one of the earliest and one of the most fundamental early versions codifying Jewish law. It's called the Torah, the modern day, not so modern, but Shulchan Aruch, the code of Jewish law that we Jews use and is the final word on Jewish law, is built upon the Torah. So what does the Torah say? Text 3, fascinating text, which shows us how there's always nuance in everything. So Chana Bracha, let's do text 3.
Stealing in danger. Nothing stands in the way of saving a life. Nevertheless, if people are in mortal danger and must steal from their fellows in order to save their lives, it is forbidden for them to do so without intention to repay.
Ooh, he says something interesting. Yes, the whole Judaism goes out the window when it's time to save a life. So somebody could say, look, I need to save a life, and if I could steal $500, I saved a life. Now, I don't know what the scenario is, but that's the scenario. So generally, it's forbidden for a Jew to steal $500. Oh, but I'm saving a life. The whole Judaism goes out the window when it's time to save a life. No problem, steal $500. Says the Torah, no, not so simple. You can't steal. You can only steal if you have in mind to repay. Right? It's borrowing stealing. Not real stealing. So he says, yes, the whole Judaism goes out the window, but there are limitations. Now, why is that?
It's like civil law, the same thing. If a boat is in danger and they find your rope and save themselves, and the rope gets ruined, they aren't stealing, but they have an obligation to replace the rope.
Oh, you still repay. You're saying if you're able to pay, still pay.
Right.
Rabbi Ettlinger gives a very interesting argument, and it's not everybody says this argument. What Rabbi Ettlinger says is that when we say that all Judaism goes out the window, when there is a life-saving emergency, we only mean religious laws between you and God. So matzah, no problem. Don't eat matzah to save a life. Shabbos, violate Shabbos to save a life. But when it comes to civil law, between man and man, interpersonal laws, no. That is never off the table. So you want to save a life and you want to steal to save a life, that you have no permission for. The most we'll let you do, but we still want to save a life, so borrow the money. You gotta
So
repay.
what's stealing?
Taking $500 from somebody else and using it.
Without the intention to replace it. Actually, the crazy law is you need stealing. I'm like,
What was that?
What is actual theft?
What-
I don't know.
1 second.
permanently depriving someone without intention of redeeming it.
Now,
I love it.
but how did we get to stealing? 1 second. But here we're talking about autopsy. How did we get to stealing? Says Rabbi Ettlinger like this. Rabbi Ettlinger does something very interesting. You know what it means to dishonor the dead? You know what it means, respect for the corpse? It means respect simply for their possessions. There's a law, don't steal. You have responsibility towards another human being's possessions. What is your most important possession that you own?
Yourself.
Yourself, your own body. Not only is it your most important and valuable possession, it's the only one you can't repay. Can't pay somebody back a ton.
I disagree.
Can't pay somebody back a finger. That's okay. Everybody's allowed to disagree.
My possessions, personally, or my children.
Okay, that's a good argument. But the point is, if it's between money and a body is all the way up there. So he says, you know what it means? You know what's the reason for this principle? Respect for a corpse? He says very simple. It's a regular civil responsibility you have towards another human being. You are not allowed to steal from that person. You could say, I'm saving a life. But guess what? You're not allowed to steal to save a life. Unless you could repay. Could you repay his cut up body? No.
What if you could?
How are you going to repay the body?
Let's say the guy died, for example, of like a very interesting kidney disease, and the guy like, let's extract one of the kidneys to study it, and I'm gonna give him back one of my kidneys.
No. You're taking his dead body.
You can't give the dead guy.
A person died. You're taking his body, and it's a beautiful intact body. What are you going to do? You're going to start chopping it up. You can't undo that.
Well, only if the dead body gave you permission.
Oh, very good. 1 second.
So what about the wife of the...
Oh, so if there's consent, is a different conversation. We'll get to there in a second. Very, very good. Okay. So you're on the right path over here. But let's first get the principle. What he's saying is, somebody dies, and you want to start touching up his body. What's the issue? Why does Judaism say respect this corpse? Why? Very simple. You're not allowed to touch his possessions. This is his body. And he says this is the very worst form of theft. Because it's the most prized possession that a person has. Of course, there's kids also. But it's definitely up there, top 5. And how are you going to repay it? And you can't even ask him permission. You can't even go to him and say, by the way, I took $500 yesterday to save a life. He'll be like, oh, sure, of course. You can't even do that. So what he says is simply for this principle, you are not allowed to steal to save a life is the reason why there's no autopsies. And that shuts the door even when there is a life-saving emergency. I don't care. Look at Jewish law. Now, that sounds like a hard-line position, right?
No,
Once-
I mean, if the person is dead and hasn't given you, once again, we're back to permission, but I guess my question will hopefully get answered later by you, but how does that impact someone like me who may have that life-threatening disease and I can say beforehand, in the event of my death, I would like humanity to learn from me.
Oh,
That's
Right,
if you
that's
get
consent, so that's what
So-
I'm just wondering if Jewish law applies.
let's talk about consent in a moment.
So-
Here somebody dies.
We'll get to there.
We're going to get to there. I promise we're going to get to there. So let's read text 4. Rabbi Ettlinger continues the story. Elki, text 4, page 126, and he says like this.
It is stated explicitly that it is forbidden to steal to save a life if one has no intention to repay. In the present case, it is impossible to repay. It is not that one cannot compensate the deceased for having been desecrated. It is therefore forbidden to save a life through the desecration of the deceased.
He's taking a hardline position over here. He says, I don't care what type of emergency you have. If you didn't get consent, right, that's what's clearly, you're stealing from the guy. And you have no way to repay the guy. You can't do it. So what he rules here in this case, in this situation, the guy died, you can't have a conversation with him. Would you be okay if we do this to hopefully, potentially save this other guy's life? He's saying this is the principle. The principle behind this is a basic civil responsibility of somebody else, no stealing. Okay, now let's do some questions. Marshall's first, yes.
So in the principle we have of if you injure someone, you're obligated, I'll use the word, to make him whole, with whatever it takes to make him whole. So in this case, you're stealing from him, but there is no way to make him whole. So if there's no way to make him whole, are you really stealing from him? Because
Why
the
not?
obligation is to make the person whole.
No, the obligation is to not steal from somebody. There's a mitzvah you're not allowed to steal. If you steal, make him whole. But it's not about making him whole, so don't steal. Now, stealing comes a lot worse if there's no way to make him whole. So that's the idea.
So the problem is the stealing or the desperation?
Meaning, what's the desecration? Stealing. Meaning that is it. He's explained to you what the desecration is. Which means, what are we desecrating here? Desecrating this basic civil principle, don't steal from somebody else. And it's a desecration because there's no way to repay it. If you could repay it, it's not such a big desecration. That's it. Meaning, I think there's nothing spiritual going on over here.
Over what terms?
Discuss that with your lawyer. Yes.
Can the children or the wife give consent?
That is One sec. We didn't talk about consent yet.
Well, it said without consent.
I told you without consent. Now, 1 second. When you read,
Is it his consent or?
you're jumping ahead, but I want to catch up to you. It's good. Everybody's there already. So let's go. Now, on the one hand, Rabbi Ettlinger, you read what he says. It sounds like he's taking a very hard line position. I don't care how pressing of a call you have. You're stealing from the guy. You can't do it. So it sounds like he's shutting the door on autopsy. But if you think about it, and I see we're already there over here at 8 o'clock at night, he's opening up a very possible door, which is consent.
Consent is not stealing. Yes.
There's a way out of stealing. How do you not steal from somebody? Ask him. I need to save a life. Can I get $500 from you? Sure. Then it's not stealing. So, there's a very easy way to solve this issue. Ask the guy for consent. Or if he gives explicitly express consent, you could go donate my body. It's a cadaver. It's a medical research. I don't care what it is. If the issue is only about theft, the guy gives consent, and all of a sudden, Rabbi Ettlinger says, do whatever you want. Whatever he told you you're allowed to do. So, actually, when you think about it, Rabbi Ettlinger's logic that's all around theft actually gives a lot of latitude for autopsy. On the one hand, if there's no consent, you can never do it. But if there is consent, life-saving, not life-saving, I don't care what it is. The guy said give consent, then gesundheit. You're basically not violating his body. You're not being disrespectful of him. So, interestingly, Rabbi Ettlinger actually is the most liberal voice. I don't like using that word, but he gives the most latitude. He gives the most space to do this over here. Now, by the way, to go even further, there's a giving express consent. And to Richard's point, what if we could reasonably assume that this deceased person would have given consent? And that's a little bit of a scary place to be. How sure do you have to be? But if you're pretty certain that this person would have given consent, Rabbi Ettlinger would even allow it. What's an example for this? Interesting example, going back to last week's class, is a mother who dies in childbirth. Now, we want to save the baby. How do you save the baby? You got to cut the womb open. Oh, 1 second. That's basically doing an autopsy. What does Rabbi Ettlinger say? You can't do that. You're stealing from the woman. It's her body. Now, did we have the ability to have a conversation with you? If you're going to die, do you give us consent to open? We didn't have that conversation with her. But what do we say?
She would have given consent.
She would have given consent. We're very certain she would have given consent. So Rabbi Ettlinger would consider that kind of probable consent, and then the next of kin, the family could say, yes, my wife would have given consent. You're allowed to desecrate this principle because we're saving a body. But according to Rabbi Ettlinger's logic, I don't care if we're here to save a baby. I don't care if we could save a life with this autopsy. If there's no consent or probable consent, implicit consent, you're locked out. There's no way to do this. This is his logic. Let's summarize this over here. Okay. The theft theory, which is coming from Rabbi Ettlinger. What he tells us is one may not hurt their fellow, meaning no violation of civil law in order to save a life. So the whole saving a life thing, I don't care about that. Out the window. That's not at play. That's not a factor here. And desecrating a corpse is worse than theft because there's no repayment. The only way out is if there's consent. Okay, so now, let's summarize Rabbi Ettlinger's approach. If the deceased consented, could you do the autopsy to save a life? Yes. Yeah, you're allowed to do it. If he consented, are you allowed to do it not to save a life? Just for... Yeah, also. He says, I don't care about life. He gave consent. If the deceased did not give consent, are you allowed to do the autopsy to save a life? No. He says, I don't care. It's all about consent because it's all about theft. And of course, if it's not to save a life, that's an easy one, no. So basically, saving a life, not saving a life to Rabbi Ettlinger makes no difference, and that's his position. How are we doing? That's good. Meaning, but again, let's just make sure we understand this. The principle behind not desecrating the body is all around the very basic responsibility we have towards somebody else's property, and including theft of their body. Okay. Let's now go look at Rabbi number 2. This takes about 100 years earlier, a little bit less than 100 years. Rabbi Yecheskel Landau is the chief rabbi of Prague. He gets a very interesting question. He's in the 18th century, in the 1700s. He gets a question that comes all the way from the Jewish community of London. Far away. What happens in London? In London, there's a Jewish man. He suffers from urinary bladder stone. What procedure do you do to try to cure urinary bladder stone? Anybody know?
Thank goodness I don't know.
Very good. Thank goodness we don't know.
We got a doctor in the
I need
house.
the surgery. I mean, an operator, you can do lithotripsy. I'm just.
They did some type of invasive surgery to try to clear it. It failed, and
Take the
it,
calcium out or whatever, right?
you do something. And back in those days,
Well, we're talking about the 1700s.
exactly right. They're not doing anything too cutting edge. They're doing. They're taking a scalpel and they're opening up and they're trying to do something. The guy dies. Okay. They know that they messed up, but they don't know how they messed up. They want to do an autopsy. Let's understand what went wrong over here so that if we as doctors ever need to do this procedure again, we will know where we have to be more careful. Sounds reasonable. What did the Jews say? We got to go ask our rabbi. No rabbi in England feels that they are qualified enough to deal with such questions. They go to the great Rabbi Yecheskel Landau in Prague and ask him for his response. Now, before we jump into what Rabbi Landau says, I just first want to process with you a difference between the scenario that was sent to Rabbi Ettlinger in Germany to this scenario that's being sent to Rabbi Landau in Prague. What's the difference?
Life-saving.
No,
Life-saving.
we're not life-saving. In Rabbi Ettlinger's case, it was a lot more pressing. We have two patients here. They're both suffering from the same disease. One died, and we have a few days to hopefully do an autopsy, understand what happened over here, diagnose what happened here, and hopefully find a cure for this other guy. So it's not theoretical. It's very practical. It's very real. We have somebody else who we hope to save their life. In this case, with Rabbi Landau, they're not saying we have somebody here who we need to do the procedure on tomorrow and we want to make sure to save his life. They're saying no, medical research purposes. Hopefully, it will give us wisdom that will save lives in the future. So it is to save a life, but we don't have, it's more theoretical. We don't have a life sitting here, right here, we want to save by doing this autopsy. So that's just a little bit of a key difference between the previous case and this case, right? Everybody gets that? Okay. What does Rabbi Landau say? Rabbi Landau begins his journey to try to answer this question from a very similar place that Rabbi Ettlinger begins. When it comes to saving a life, what do? Everything. What won't we do? Everything besides the 3 cardinal sins go out the window. And in this case, we're hopefully trying to save a life. And therefore, autopsy is not a violation of the 3 cardinal sins. It's tempting to say, let's do it. But Rabbi Landau says no. Yeah, it's tempting to want to apply that principle, but he says, no, this is too far-fetched. We can't apply it over here. Why? Because we don't have an emergency right here. That's his argument. Let's read what Rabbi Landau says, and then we need to process it. We need to process it, and we need to compare to where Rabbi Ettlinger went with this, which means they're both beginning from the same place. They both have a question. They both say, let's maybe apply the let's save a life principle. Rabbi Ettlinger said no, and he went this direction. Rabbi Landau also says no, but he goes in a totally different direction. Why no? Rabbi Ettlinger said no because it's stealing. You can't steal to save a life. Rabbi Landau comes and says, where are we holding? Debbie, what about you? All right, Debbie, text 5, page 128.
Okay, it is a clearly established law that we must override the Shabbat laws in our attempt to save a life, even if the chance of success is doubtful. However, this is true only if there is a present threat to life before us, as in the case of an ill person or a collapsed building. But in this case, there is no current patient who would immediately benefit from this dissection. Rather, the physicians want to learn about this surgery because they might in the future encounter a patient who will require it. Certainly, we cannot override a prohibition for this lesser concern. For if we were to indeed consider this a case of life and death, it would follow that all forbidden labors on Shabbat would be permitted if they had any medical benefit. Even if no one were currently ill, it would be permitted to grind and cook medicines and prepare a knife for bloodletting because of the mere possibility that during Shabbat or immediately afterward, someone will fall deathly ill and require those things. If we are permissive about dissection, they will dissect all of our dead simply to study anatomy and know how to treat the living.
Oh, okay, so Rabbi Landau is coming and saying, okay, look, if you're coming to me with a real, present, acute, life-threatening situation, which is here in front of us, it's clear, it's present, we can have that conversation. He says over here, it's theoretical. And he says, I can't do it. theoretically saving a life sometime in the future, nobody knows when, is not grounds to apply this principle. Okay. And he gives a good rationale why not. Because if we're going to start letting people violate Jewish law and throw mitzvahs and laws out the window for life-saving purposes, even theoretical, that means the whole Judaism goes out the window. Maybe something's going to happen. If I go on a walk on Shabbos, I'm not supposed to carry my phone. I'm not supposed to use my phone on Shabbos. Well, if I'm going on a walk on Shabbos, I'm going to take my phone. Why? Maybe there's going to be a life-threatening situation. I need my phone on me. So you're going to start breaking shot. Maybe none of us should go to shul on Yom Kippur. All of us should go to the beach. Maybe someone's going to start drowning, and we got to be there to save a life. Where do you draw the line at that point?
Isn't that a tell?
That's all something else. But let's see if we get there in a moment. What he says is, if there's a real emergency, we understand what it is, we'll do it. But there's no clear thing over here. Okay. And what he also says is, which is a very good rationale, if we're looking here to potentially save lives, then there's no limits anymore for autopsies. Every single body they're going to want to do an autopsy. Maybe, just maybe, we'll find this person a disease we've never ever heard of before, and we'll all of a sudden have scientific data on it. So he says no. We don't do autopsy. We'll only do it if there's a real, clear, present emergency here. And this is Rabbi Landau's position, and we're going to call this the sanctity theory. We're going to see in a moment why. And he says, he gives us this term. We need pikuach nefesh, which means a life-threatening situation. And he adds the words lefaneinu. It's before us. It's here, clear in front of us. A clear and present danger to life. That's what we need. Okay. Here we have the two answers from the rabbis. Interestingly, let's just try to think. If Rabbi Landau got, not his question, from London, what if he got Rabbi Ettlinger's question? Rabbi Ettlinger said, you want to save a life? I don't care. There's no consent. Don't do it. What if Rabbi Landau got that question? Sounds like he's going to say yes.
How do you know?
Because it's
He's clearly giving us his rationale over here. He's telling us, life-threatening situation. But this is not it. He's clearly implying, it's clearly implicit over here, that if a real, clear, present, life-threatening situation, there's what to talk about.
But he'll desecrate flesh and he'll steal.
Oh, and notably, he has no mention about stealing. Rabbi Ettlinger goes and gives us a whole mouthful about stealing and the body and the most prized possession. Rabbi Landau doesn't say a word about that. What does he say? He gives us the majority rabbinic position on what desecration is about. Rabbi Ettlinger spoke to us about theft, which is a very civil, between man and man obligation. Rabbi Landau invokes a whole different principle, a whole different rationale, which we're going to see practically changes a lot, which I already showed you a little bit. But what he says is, this is not just about a civil obligation, do not steal. Yeah, it's also theft, but it's so much more than theft. What is it? He's going to give us the principle that a body, even a dead body, is a holy, sacred entity. It's holy. And holy items in Judaism are treated with a certain level of respect. And he's going to quote to us a piece of Talmud. And this Talmud gives a whole different perspective over here. So, let's do this. Stuart, text 6a, page 130 from the Talmud.
Handling scroll. Just as human bones must be handled respectfully, so must a Torah scroll.
Wow, that's a heavy statement. The Talmud's going and equating the bones of a human with a Torah scroll. So this is already giving us a little bit of a taste of the sacredness.
It
Yes.
seems like spiritually it should read the other way. Just as a Torah scroll must be handled respectfully, so should human bones.
So I'm sure there's what to learn even from this. Why is the Talmud
why
coming
is
from
this?
this direction? The Talmud is saying, yeah, you see a law, you got to treat human bones respectfully. Oh, that teaches us about a Torah scroll. That's pretty amazing. We're saying Torah scroll, which is the most, if there's anything we treat well, a Torah scroll is the highest up there, highest priority in the care that we give it. And just look at what we do to a Torah scroll. We cover it beautifully. We'll never put it on the floor. When you pick it up, everybody has to stand. We put it away in a beautiful ark. That's serious stuff over here. And that's what we equate a human body to. So what's the connection between a Torah scroll and a human body? Stuart, what was that?
Both were created by Hashem.
Well, a lot of things were created by Hashem. The tree was also created by Hashem. So, Stuart, comes the Ritva, one of the most important commentaries on the Talmud, and explains to us what's going on over here. Text 6b.
The human Torah, Nachmanides, points to the sacred names of God that are inked onto a Torah scroll's parchment as an analogy for the sacred scroll that is installed within the sacred soul that is installed within the corporeal body.
Ooh. What happens to a Torah scroll? He's giving us a little bit more of a logic over here. What happens to a Torah scroll? Torah scroll, the story of the Torah scroll begins way before the Sofer got it to start writing the Torah. These sheets of parchment, where did they come from? Cow's hide. What's a cow's hide? Any respect? It's a cow's hide. It's dirty, it's smelly, it's stinky. If he's going to die, we don't care that much about the cow's hide. The maggots will eat it. If you're lucky, that hide will turn into a belt or a pair of shoes. Okay, it has a little bit of a better ending. But all of a sudden, what could you do with it? You could take this cow's hide, work it to become fit, to become a Torah scroll. You could write the words of Torah, write God's name on that Torah scroll, on this parchment, and all of a sudden, we don't just say, okay, the parchment has something holy written on it. We don't say that. We say the parchment itself becomes holy. And even if you could totally scrape off every single little bit of ink from that parchment, the parchment became holy. It became a Torah. It doesn't have the Torah written on it. It is a Torah. And for that reason, even if there's just a little piece of parchment from a Torah scroll, there's nothing even written on it. Nothing was ever written on this piece of parchment. It's like, it's from the margin part of the Torah. You say, well, it doesn't have any Torah written on it. You store it in the garbage. You don't say that. No, it's the Torah now. Torah was written, God's names was written on the Torah. The actual cow's hide just became holy. And forever and ever, we will treat it with that respect. Says the Talmud, what's going on over here? What's a human body? A human body? Okay, what is it? It's flesh and blood. Bone, tissue, nothing holy over here. But then God takes a soul, a divine soul, and places it into the body. And just like the parchment held the words of the Torah, so too the body now holds the life of the divine life here. And we don't just say that here's a body that is holding a sacred soul. The body itself assumes a sacred identity. Now, with this argument, he's going to say that the actual body, not because you're stealing from the body, not because of any civil obligation, but a body simply by the fact that life was here in this body is forever a sacred entity. Which means it's not a civil issue, it's a religious, spiritual issue. For that reason, according to Rabbi Landau, there's no mention of consent. If it's about of consent. If it's about thievery and stealing from somebody, okay, we could have a conversation. Well, does the person mind? Is there consent? He says, consent? Who asked you your opinion? It's my body. It's not your body. God gave you a body. It's holy. You're not going to want to go. We learned about this in lesson number 1. In Jewish law, according to Jewish law, you're not allowed to self-harm. I want to scratch myself. You're not allowed to self-harm. Self-harm.
Self-harm.
I want to scratch myself. Well, I'm going to ask somebody else. I want you to punch me in the face. Now, people do that for a sport. This morning's class, we had a boxer. He was getting all, as we say in Yiddish, sechepet. He was getting a little bit sensitive about this issue. Okay, so we had to clearly veer away. But you're not allowed to ask somebody to hit you. Why? It's a sacred body. You're not allowed to hit a Torah scroll. But this is my body. Well, no, God gave you a holy body. So you don't mind having an autopsy? Okay, well, that's wonderful. What about God? It's a holy thing. You're not allowed to start cutting it open. You're going to give it and donate it to be a cadaver, and for the next 10 months, they're going to chop it up, and you're going to have people playing around with it, looking into it, carving into it. Is that how we treat a sacred entity?
So according to him, you're not allowed to donate a kidney also?
Organ donations we'll get to in a moment. Let's first talk about autopsy. The basic principle, what he says, what does the Talmud mean when it says we need to respect the dead? It has nothing to do with thievery. The body is a sacred entity. That's the principle. Oh. So it's not civil. It's a religious issue. Because of that, consent makes no difference. I don't care if you let and you sign papers for the government. Jewish law doesn't let you do that to the human body. It's your body. It doesn't matter. Now, but what about when there's a medical emergency? What about when there's an emergency we can save a life? Do we violate religious law to help save a life? All the time, no problem. And if this is a religious issue, all of a sudden the issue of pikuach nefesh, saving a life, is back in play. Oh, now we're willing to consider in a life-saving emergency, which means we don't want to do an autopsy and violate the sanctity of a human body, but to save a life, please be my guest. God always does that. God always wants us to violate religious law to save a life. We violate Shabbos, we'll violate the sanctity of the human body, but consent has nothing to do with it. So what we see over here is that Rabbi Ettlinger goes in one direction. That's all about the civil obligation of not stealing. Rabbi Landau goes with a more spiritual, religious issue of the body's sanctity. And because of that, when we would have exceptions totally change. According to Rabbi Landau, a body sacred entity, the human body gains permanent sanctity, as it was once the vehicle for the sacred soul, just as a Torah is. It is not ours to desecrate, which means even if we want to give consent, makes no difference. And now let's do this exact same thing with Rabbi Landau's approach. The C's consented, and we're trying to save a life.
Yes.
Yes. Why yes?
Save a life.
Save a life. And consent, so we don't even have that issue. Okay, for sure. What if it's not to save a life, but there's consent?
No.
But it gives consent.
Can't disagree.
Does make a difference. We don't. Oh, okay. Actually, let's go down this way. So, there's no consent, but we want to save a life. No problem. Consent, no consent, nobody cares. Saving a life, we're in. If there is consent, but it's not to save a life, I don't care consent. We don't touch a sacred body. We don't do the autopsy. And there's no consent. And we're not saving a life, of course, that's an easy one. You're not allowed to do it. So basically, what we're seeing over here is that Rabbi Landau couldn't care less about this. Consent, no consent, it's not at play. It's all about saving a life or not saving a life. Rabbi Ettlinger couldn't care less about saving a life or not saving a life. All he cared about was consent. Interesting. Okay.
When you say caring, it means he doesn't consider it stealing, or he doesn't care?
It's not at play. Meaning that's not one of the considerations that we are looking at. He would still consider it stealing, but practically speaking, if you want to determine halacha, it has no practical bearings on it. Okay. Now, there are a few loose ends we got to touch up upon over here, but we don't have another hour and a half, so I'll just touch about them briefly. You're saying we should do an encore. It's our last class. Do an encore, go another hour, right? Okay. Rabbi Landau says, I'm only willing to allow an autopsy if it's a life-saving emergency. Not a theoretical emergency, a real, clear, present, acute, life-saving emergency. Now, here's a question for you. What are the limitations of life-saving emergencies? Now, we all understand. I have somebody right here. If I cut open this body, I can save this body. That's easy. That's easy. What if it's a lot more murkier?
Only a chance you would save the life.
Or there's only a chance, or it's not as clearly present. Now, here's a little bit of an example for this. This is the example given in halachic literature. Interesting contemporary example. Early days of the state of Israel, these yishuvim, these settlements, and these kibbutzim are pretty far away. And they're pretty isolated. You know, the kibbutz only has one car. You know, olden day Israeli society, there's only one nurse for the whole kibbutz. Religious kibbutz, life-saving emergency on Shabbos. Of course, she goes, administers care for the patient, and if necessary, gets into the car, drives to the local hospital. She gets to the hospital. It's still Shabbos. Is she allowed to drive back? Is there an emergency?
No.
Emergency's over. The patient's out of her care.
She cannot drive back.
But she's the only nurse. If there's going to be a life-saving emergency, we're not going to have a nurse. But
Or a car.
or a car. But is that life-saving emergency here?
No.
It's theoretical.
No, yeah.
Oh, but is it less theoretical? But it's more real than just saying, let's cut this guy open for a urinary, kidney stone. Because maybe we'll understand something for future. It's a little bit more real than that. Why? Because it's a probability that in this kibbutz, I'm saying there's a strong possibility. It's pretty real. We need her. We need the car. So all of a sudden, pikuach nefesh, saving a life, we come up with all these theories which could play with our minds and be like, inching this way, inching that way. It's not 100% real and present, but it's close to real and present. Interesting situation over here.
Doesn't the 50-50 rule that we talked about before, where there's more or less?
It doesn't apply here. It's not 50-50. So the point is, I don't want to answer this question because we could do another hour and a half class about this. What are the parameters of pikuach nefesh? We know the rule, violate everything in Judaism besides the big three to save a life. But how real does that need have to be? That's a whole hour and a half class. And according to Rabbi Landau, which is making that the critical decision, decisive issue, which will determine if we can make an exception about autopsy, he's going to have to answer that question. How acute, how real, how present does the life-threatening danger need to be in order for us, which we'll say, yeah, let's do the autopsy. So I'm not going to answer that question. I just want to point out to you that loose end. There's another loose end, which is maybe a little bit of a more modern issue. Before we do that, let me just summarize over here. According to Rabbi Ettlinger, theft theory. Rabbi Ettlinger is all about the issue of desecrations all around, revolves around the issue of theft. What he'll say is, if there's no consent, always forbidden, autopsy is forbidden, it's desecration, even to save a life, because even to steal there's no grounds. Even if there's a life-threatening situation, there's never grounds to violate theft. But if you do have consent, it's not a desecration, and therefore, gesundheit. Go ahead and do that. Rabbi Landau and the majority, Rabbi Ettlinger is not the majority voice. In general, you look at the halachic authorities, Rabbi Landau is just a sample voice. Give you one voice out of the majority opinion. Rabbi Landau is definitely the majority opinion. He's going with the sanctity theory. It's not about theft. It's about the inherent sanctity of the body. He says consent, totally irrelevant. The only issue at play is it's only allowed if there's an urgent life-saving reason over here. Yes?
So the majority, based on this reasoning, would not permit myself to donate my body to science when I die.
That's correct. That's not about organ donation. Organ donation, do we know who it's going to go to? Is it going to be used? Some people say organ donation, and they do take those organs. They have nobody to give it to. So what happens with those organs? At a certain point, they pass this expiration date. Then what do they do with it?
But there's an awful long waiting list, I must say.
There's awful. Oh, yeah, that's true.
I'm sure they can find somebody.
You would hope. Okay, so dear friends, there's another issue over here. There's another loose end which will make another question over here. What's an autopsy?
Is the bathroom back there, Stuart?
Is that locked?
Seems like.
Give a knock.
Nobody.
Nobody should be in there. And with your finger, you should be able to unlock it. It could be somebody by mistake locked it. Or it could be the doors that drop jammed.
Oh, it's just tough.
Just a little bit jammed.
Stick, carry on.
Okay, continuing the story. Okay. What about if it's not such an invasive autopsy? Autopsy literally means we're going to take a knife, we're going to chop things open, and we're going to dismember this body. Okay, that's harsh. Would halacha allow a little bit of testing? A biopsy. Take a little bit of blood. Take a little bit of tissue. Take a little bit of some sample of the body, which is not invasive. The body's still intact, but we are starting to tamper with the body. Does that already violate this law of desecration, or is that okay? This was a question asked to, let's bring back a repeat player, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein passed away in 1987, the most important halachic authority for contemporary questions, a rabbi in Manhattan, and he was asked this question. This is what he says about this question of doing like a biopsy or doing non-invasive testing, which could give us a lot of, it could give a tremendous amount, a wealth of information for a pathologist to work with. Would that be a middle ground that Judaism would consider okay? Let's read text 9. Where are we holding? Sean, are you read already?
Well,
Richard? Can't forget about Richard. Go ahead, Richard. Text 9.
In my opinion, it would not constitute a violation of the above desecration. Physicians will not cut open the limbs, neck, or torso, but only seek to perform a needle biopsy in order to obtain fluid for diagnostic analysis, and evaluation. It is not a form of desecration. It is permissible because it is very common to do such procedures on the living. Likewise, removing blood via needle and syringe for analysis does not constitute desecration and is permitted. Although I have not found this stated explicitly in earlier sources, it seems
You
clear
agree?
to me that this is true.
He's only talking about fluid. If you took a tissue biopsy, that would be the same as removing an organ, just because you did it with a needle.
Yeah, but he's saying that in an alive person, we do biopsies all the time. So in an analogous way, we're taking a biopsy from someone who's dead, but we would do the same exact procedure
But he says,
on someone's
he
living.
says fluid. And
No, but he gives us the
your blood and
rationale.
your
What's
body fluid is
But what's the
replaceable.
rationale? He's giving us a rationale. What's the rationale? We're not cutting open limbs, neck, or torso. We're only performing a needle biopsy. So he does say fluid. So you're saying, does that mean fluid and not tissue?
Your blood is constantly being replenished. I guess your cells
But
are
this
also-
is his question. This is his question. If you go to the doctor's office, they say we need to do a little biopsy. We're gonna take a little sample of a tissue. Oh, so what is that? I never did that before. Oh, it's not a big deal. We put in a little tissue in it. It's a little prick, nothing to worry about. Okay, no problem. Meaning, what would a human consider invasive, and what would a human not consider invasive? When I go and they do a blood test, I don't consider that invasive, even if it's not the most comfortable thing in the world. It's not invasive. But if they all of a sudden say, we got to cut open a side of your head, we got to, what are you doing? I'm thinking twice. I consider that invasive. So that's the question. What does a human consider regular human medical testing, which is not cutting open any part of the body, and that is something which we as humans were comfortable with? That, he says, you could do that too. That type of testing is okay. Once we go past that, that's already going into the territory of possibly desecrating the body. Now, interestingly, going back to an earlier case I mentioned, giving a C-section. When a woman finds out in the hospital, you're not going to be able to give a vaginal birth, we're going to have to do a cesarean over here. Is that considered no problem, or does that feel invasive? It's invasive. So, from a halachic perspective, doing a C-section would be considered autopsy-ish, because it's invasive. But then we'd have to look at the other considerations. According to Rabbi Ettlinger, is there consent, or would there be consent? And Rabbi Landau would say, are we saving a life? We save a fetus's life. We as we learned last week, we're willing to break Shabbos for that, so we'd even break autopsy laws. But you're seeing how doing a C-section on a deceased woman who died in childbirth is the question of autopsy is at play over there as well. Yes.
When you say invasion, let's fast forward to Star Trek, and you're the doctor on the spaceship.
I'm not familiar, but okay.
Well, they do things we don't do right now, and I'm going to dematerialize one of your kidneys without cutting you. I'm not invading you, and the machine's go blah, 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 and then your kidney's going to be in this jar, and I didn't cut you. I didn't do anything, so it's not invasive. It's
So
okay.
you're saying you're asking me a science fiction question
On a show he's never seen.
on a show I've never seen, and you want to know what Halacha would say
you're
about science
making
You
fiction?
understand his theory?
Invasive means cutting into something, and I'm saying you're removing a body part. If it's a piece of tissue, it's a body part.
Okay.
Say it differently. Say it differently.
Laparoscopy.
The biopsy where you put a needle in and take a piece of tissue,
You're removing a piece of the body.
500 years ago would have been considered invasive,
Right.
Right.
but now it's not.
Very good. So it could be it's a subjective measure.
So he's
Do
saying
humans,
in the future, things that we now consider invasive may no longer be.
meaning, let's put it this way: if there will be a time that such science fiction becomes reality, which is, of course, very, very possible because a lot of science fiction today is possible, we would have to ask the question to Rabbi Feinstein. The reason why he was asked this question in 1987 and why Rabbi Ettlinger wasn't asked that in 1897 is very simple, because they weren't doing biopsies back then. And what does he say? I love this last line. He says, I have not found this explicitly in earlier sources. He's not working with any precedents over here to make this type of nuanced distinction, but he says he's a halachic authority. This is why we trust halachic authorities. It seems clear to me. And his ruling becomes binding. Which means he just created a new law of halacha out of thin air. I don't think there's any dissenting voices. Everybody considers this sound. But interestingly, he's not coming with anything real. But he's using the principles of Judaism and trying to use it to inspire to him. And he's being creative over here, which is very, very interesting. Okay. In any case, now another element over here is that today, becoming a little bit more popular, slowly but surely, is called virtual autopsies. Instead of going and literally going and cutting open and dissecting and looking at this body, we can do MRI scans, CAT scans, and get 3D imagery and do that type of thing. Would halacha find that problematic? The answer is no. It's non-invasive. A human would do that, no problem. Lay down over here. We'll scan you an X-ray. So that would be something. Looking into the future, that if there's ever a pressing need to do an autopsy to solve a crime or search into disease, all of a sudden this could be the answer to a lot of that tension. Here's a way to do it: virtual autopsy, which is not desecrating the human body, but at the same time could give us the medical or non-medical answers that we're looking for. Okay, so now, dear friends, it's 8:40. We're not done. Of course not. It's not 9 o'clock yet. We've just discussed the non-invasive procedures are permitted even if there's no consent was given and even if there's no present life is at stake, because that's not invasive. We don't consider that a desecration. So that gives a lot more latitude to do these types of autopsies, either a biopsy or a virtual autopsy. Okay, there's a whole nother issue at play. What could be the potential issue with autopsies in Judaism? One issue which I spoke about is the mitzvah to not desecrate the human body. There's a whole different issue, which gives us something else we have to consider. That other issue is the mitzvah of burial. There's a mitzvah in Jewish law to specifically bury a dead body. Now, we don't do this for practical reasons. We don't do this for sanitary reasons. There's something very specific. Bury a body in the ground. You say, I'll bury the body in the attic of a building. No. Or I'll bury them at sea. It's respectful. No. Specifically, a body must be buried in the ground. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. Let's read text 11 just to see how far this mitzvah goes. Shana, we're up to you.
Yes.
Page 137.
If the deceased have instructed that they not be buried after their death, we do not obey, because we are commanded to bury our dead, as the verse states, you shall bury them on that same day.
That's a very big deal. Somebody says, I don't want to be buried. I'm giving consent, cremating me, donating me, not buried. Jewish law says, even though usually the wishes of the dead, by the way, are very sacrosanct. Somebody who passed away made a wish, we need to honor that. We'll bend backwards to honor that. But he says, don't bury me? That's impossible. We're going to bury you. Why? It's a mitzvah in the Torah. Now, what is the importance of this law? And why do we do this? Why bury the body? What's the significance of it? The significance touches upon a theme that we've been speaking about this whole course, that we don't own our body. Western society tends to think about, it's my body, my choice, I have autonomy, I can do whatever I want, it's my body. Judaism says no. Your body is a gift from God. And as we're learning in today's class, it's sacred, it's holy. God gives you your body on loan, which is why there's a mitzvah to take very good care of your body. It's God's body. You gotta make sure to go to the doctor, take your medicine. There's an obvious question. God gives you your body on loan. How do you return it? The last mitzvah that a human being gets to do, which they don't get to do themselves, but they get to prepare for it, and their family helps them do that mitzvah, is the mitzvah of returning their body back to their maker via burial. So it's not just the practical, traditional, customary way of how we Jews dispose of our dead, to use that crude language. There's a tremendous amount of spiritual significance to this idea. This is how we return our body back to God. It's on loan to us. We need to return it, and that's done through burial. Let's read text 12 on page 138. Correct. You're up to reading?
Sorry, reading ahead. Are we on returning the deposit?
Yeah.
For you were made from dust, and to dust you will return. Genesis 3:19. The human body was created from the earth, and our bodies are handed to us as a deposit. Upon death, the deposit must be returned to the earth, from where it was taken for burial.
So burial must happen. This is a very important religious, significant thing for us to do. It needs to be given back to the earth from where it comes from. That is the way that we symbolically return the body back to Hashem. And it needs to be done with the entire body. This is a very key principle. The entire body must be placed back there. According to Jewish law, if even one part of the body is left out, it's considered that no burial happened yet.
What about organ donation?
That's a very good question. Now, organ donation is a murky question. There's some text in the appendix about that. Under some conditions, yes. Under some conditions, no. But that's a very, very tricky question for this. Now we're seeing why. We need the whole body to go. The only question about organ donation is if this organ now becomes alive with somebody else's soul. That may make it not part of your life anymore. So that's okay. It's still alive. So that may change things, but it's a very tricky question. Okay, organ donation is a separate class. We, by the way, out of all the classes, this was the hardest class to choose what direction we're going to go in. The body's dignity. There's so many questions you could start
We
with.
needed 5 sections to this class at least.
By the way, I know I give a good class if there's a tremendous thirst. This wasn't enough. That's good. The worst thing for a rabbi is to teach class. They're like, "Yo, that's wonderful. I just mastered the topic." Oh no! Oh no! I just did a horrible job here. If you walk out saying, I have so much more to learn," that is gold. That's where the journey of learning begins. When somebody whets your appetite and you realize, wow, there's so much more to learn over
When
here.
are you holding the 5th class?
I love this. Next week, Labor Day. Okay.
Are these all, this is a silly question, I suppose, but pertaining just to Jewish body versus a non-Jewish body?
This is Jewish law. This is a responsibility of a Jew.
Jew, okay.
Does a non-Jew have this mitzvah? I don't think a non-Jew has this mitzvah,
Does a Jew have
although...
a responsibility to a non-Jew to treat
Right,
their
exactly.
body with the same respect
Yes,
as a treat
yes,
their own?
yes.
That's
That's,
Yeah.
Yes.
that's what he's asking.
Yes.
Generally speaking, yeah. Which means, even though the law against cremation applies, uniquely to Jews, we actually see that as a value for all humanity. We're against cremation for all humans. We believe in the value of all humans having a proper burial. But at the same time, not the same level. Mitzvah is binding to Jews. It's not binding to a non-Jew. So it can be something which we find value for all human beings, but is it binding as a mitzvah? Some yes, some no. They have 7 Noahide laws. Abortion from last week does apply to non-Jews. We spoke a little bit about
So
that by the
it
end
would
of
be
last week.
wrong for me to take an unnamed body, presumably.
For medical research?
Yeah. No,
That is a very good
to
question.
the medical school.
That is a very good question. Would a Jew, somebody asked this to me this morning, and you know what? I feel bad I didn't research it in the interim, because I really should have researched this question before. Her daughter's in med school right now. They're doing gross anatomy, first year. They're looking at body. So would it be an issue for a Jew to study anatomy from a non-Jewish cadaver? Or is all of a sudden this whole thing, I didn't know the answer. There are Jewish religious doctors who studied gross anatomy, and I imagine they've done it the exact same way that all other medical students would do it. So I'm not sure the answer. I'm sure there's a discussion, but I haven't done that research. Okay, but dear friends, let's stay on topic over here. So, one of the key issues of donating a body or part of a body is that does burial happen?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Does burial happen? If you
Yes, but you have to find the parts if you can.
Oh, yes, are finding parts. Where are they? Sometimes what happens is that at a certain point, there's nothing to bury anymore. It just gets so, or they put it through certain testing. And you cannot be certain anymore that the body in its entirety is going to be buried. It's a very good question. If you amputate a part of your body, so this is the answer. If you're still living, which means things change if it's death or if it's just the amputation of one part of your body. If there's one part of your body that you are amputating and it's a full limb, meaning it's a limb, it's not an organ. A limb, according to Jewish law, is any part of the body that has both a bone, tissue, and flesh. All three. Organ doesn't necessarily. That already I'm not 100% sure, but a limb needs to be buried. So what you'll do is, if you're here in Detroit, all the hospitals have a relationship with Chesed Shalem, Hebrew Memorial Society, and they do this regularly. Every now and then they have a special plot where they put body parts to be buried. If you have to amputate, God forbid, a toe is a bone, then it's a limb, and then needs to be buried. But if not, then not necessarily. But when somebody dies, we want even the last drop of blood. The last drop of blood. In terrorist attacks, this is what you see. God forbid. They send Zaka. There's a whole organization that does this. What Zaka does is they go to the terrorist attack and they go to the scene of the terrorist attack and they make sure that we can bury the whole body. And unfortunately, it's sometimes horribly gruesome. You have to get every drop of blood. So they're literally scratching paint off the wall because we want to bury this entire body with every last drop of blood.
So it's okay to suck your blood out with a needle, and it's not desecrating you. The blood that was spattered on a wall is the same
At
blood.
the moment of death. Right. We're a lot more sensitive at that moment. Okay, so Rabbi Meir Shapiro, very important rabbi in Poland, early 1900s, he looked into this question. Could we donate body parts to the local medical school in Poland? And would there be an issue? And he touches upon this problem over here about burial. Text 13, Patrick, you don't want to read, right? So Marshall, right back at you. Text 13, page 139.
Even those opinions that tend to be more lenient regarding the question of desecrating the dead would agree that there is no permission to provide bodies to the medical schools in Poland. We have done an investigation into the protocols of the prosectorium and have learned that many of the limbs of bodies donated to these medical schools are never buried. Some are scalded, some are stored in containers, and some are branded with numerals. The Jerusalem Talmud states, when the Torah commands bury them, it is instructing us to bury the entire corpse. This informs us that if part of the body is left unburied, it is as if no burial has occurred.
It's a heavy statement. If even one part of the body is left unburied, it's like no burial happened here. You've done a part of it, you've not completed the burial of this person over here. So this is another issue over here that we need to bury the entire body. The moment we are donating the body, we got big problems over here. Okay, why? Because it's questionable if and ever this body is ever going to get a proper burial in its entirety. There's another element over here. Burials have to be done with the entire body, and there's also another point. Burials need to be done right away. According to Jewish law, and I'll explain to you in a moment the significance of this, ideally, the very day that a person dies, the burial should happen that day. My father once was dealing with a case, a family, in where I grew up. The parent passed away. They were sick for a very, very long time. And the family can't be grounded while the parent is on hospice, so it was a good few months. Their luck, I believe it was the father, passed away when the family was on a 2-week vacation. Right when they left the vacation. So they got the horrible news. They're like, all right, listen. They told the funeral home, put him in a freezer. We'll be back in 2 weeks. And we'll take care of the funeral then. And my father tried intervening. No, get back on a plane here. Bury them, then go back on vacation after Shiva. This has to be done the same day. And they would not hear it. They're like, we're on vacation. We planned this for a long time. We got freezers for a reason. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And they were actually very upset at my father for being so rough on them. My father was harassing them, like, let's give your father the mitzvah to be buried right away. In any case, one of the mitzvahs over here is that not just burial of the whole body, but burial right away. We don't want to push it off. Ideally, that very same day. Now, could we wait a day for family from Australia to come in? Yeah, but no more than a day. Maximum 2 days. There's no waiting time over here.
Is there an actual law about how many days you can?
Yeah. There are laws. You are allowed to push off the burial for, number one, for family to be there. Things that honor the deceased. If we will push it off for a day and honor the deceased wishes, by doing that, that's a good thing. So for example, if all of his children could be there, that's honoring the deceased, that his whole family could be there, or her whole family could be there. So we'll push it off for a day or two. But the family can't say, well, we're on vacation, we'll be back in 2 weeks, wait for us till then. That's not happening. But if they get on a plane right that day, go to the airport, buy a ticket, it's going to be expensive. Yes, you're flying in for your parents' funeral. That will wait. Another one is to give us time to announce it. So like that, there could be a large crowd there. That's bringing honor to the deceased that they had a large funeral. But we're not talking about waiting for a week. We're not putting an ad in the newspaper and waiting 3 weeks until it gets approved and printed. We're giving a day or two day or two, we're willing to do. Yes?
What about if it's morning of, like Friday morning, okay, morning of Shabbat. Someone here, their last child is in Israel, okay? He or she wants all their children at the funeral. Can it wait till
Sunday? Yeah, that happens, yeah.
Well, I mean, you can't fly on Shabbos.
No, but they'll do it literally the first possible minute.
Okay, because it's not in the case of saving someone's life. The life is gone, so you can't break the Shabbat rules to get there.
By the way, another example. Let's say the person died in America and they want to be buried in Israel. That's giving honor to the deceased. So yes, we will be delaying it because it's a 9-hour flight and it takes a few hours to get all the logistics in place. And then when they get to Israel, then there's going to be a funeral there. So significantly delaying things by 24, 36, 48 hours. But that's giving honor. But the point is, get a move on it, do what you need to do, bury it right away. The ideal is right away. If you're going to do something which brings honor to the deceased, especially if we know that there's something which they wanted, yes. But no elective, just pushing things off.
Back in the day, you couldn't do it. One of my grandfathers, when he died, a heart attack on a Friday afternoon, he was in the earth before Shabbos.
That's the Jewish way.
And almost nobody could make it. But you couldn't even delay if you wanted. There was no refrigeration. There was none of that. So it was a matter of hours from dead to buried.
Mushki's grandfather passed away Erev Pesach. It's the busiest day. Everybody's making a Seder that night. And it's like, you have to burn the chametz. He passed away, I think, at 10 o'clock. The Seder's in 8 hours. They had a funeral right away, dug up a grave right away, had him buried. Family was back in Brooklyn. Sat Shiva for a half hour. Seder was that night.
Yeah.
And then no more Shiva. Because once you hit a Yom Tov, Shiva's over. So that's the Jewish way. And it sounds pretty crazy. We have no time to even announce it. Nobody could come. At the end of the day, that's... So now, if it wouldn't have been Erev Pesach, they would have waited another day to announce something. But that's the Jewish way to do it. Knock it out. Now, but we don't have time over here to give a full rundown of the Jewish laws of burial. Another class, week number 6. I think we're already like week 17 over here. We've got so many issues that have come up over here. By the way, there are books about this. There are books of medical ethics, halacha, other things. If you like this stuff, I could give you lots of literature. Okay, now, well, let's read over here. But this is a scary text. Text 14, Yechiel, we're back at you. This is from the Midrash, text 14, page 140.
Body and soul rest. The dust returns to the earth as it was at the start of creation, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. When does the spirit return to God who gave it? When the dust returned to the earth as it was.
Ooh, this is scary. We all know the soul continues its journey when life on earth ends. Where does it go? It goes to heaven. It continues. Okay. What releases the soul from the body? Burial. First, the body needs to be returned to God. Then the soul could go. Which means a dead body, until it's buried, literally has a soul right there. On the one hand, the soul has detached from the body. But the soul, if we could think about it in spatial terms, doesn't leave. It's like right there with the body. It's still attached to the body. It's not released from the body fully yet. When will it continue on a spiritual journey, wherever it goes, to hell, to heaven, everything? That only happens after it's buried. Now, this text, first of all, shows us just how scary it is and what type of tragedy it is when a Jew is cremated. What are you doing to that soul? You're locking that soul. You're not allowing it to continue its journey, its destiny. And you throw the key. You lock it up and throw the key away. We speak about the soul should rest in peace. You cremate a body, there's no resting in peace. You just force that soul into limbo. There's no way out. Because you can't even give a proper burial to, when it's cremated, you burnt the body.
What if the ashes are spread?
There's no ashes. Ashes are ground up bone. The body disintegrates. It's over. It goes up in smoke. There's nothing to bury anymore. You could bury the bones, but all the whole body, the flesh and the tissue, was destroyed by fire.
Well, does that apply also to somebody who is dies in a fire, or like we said in the terrorist attack?
That was a Russian case.
That was a question about the Holocaust.
Yeah, or the
What we can know is that that's God's business, and there's no question that God takes care of such souls.
Well, then how do they even treat, like, we hear stories here of how a whole community might have been herded into a synagogue, and the synagogue lit.
Yeah, the Holocaust, yeah.
Is that site considered?
The burial place?
Yeah.
It would not be. It would not be. First of all, we would try to bury as much as we can. But when it's premeditated that a Jew cremates themselves, or family does it to a Jewish, it causes tremendous. This is one out of 15 issues with cremation.
In a case where those people didn't have a choice.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's that's God's business, and God takes care, and we have no question those souls are in heaven.
Okay.
So they're not. But when somebody does it themselves,
That's a different.
that's already self-imposed. Yes.
Just give me a question, and let's say if there's a Jew doesn't care at all, wants to be cremated, but you have an option, for example, to bury him today and then take him out and cremate him, for example. Is it worth it to do it? Because
That is a good question. I don't know. That is a very good question. I don't know the answer to that. You're saying we'll still cremate him because he wants it, but maybe we can just bury him for a day.
And they will, because we don't have an option, but they give you permission to do the religious.
That is a great question. I don't know. Yes, Marshall.
Well, in this thing we just read in 14, it says, when the dust returns to the earth as it was, to me that implies decomposition, not just burial. When the dust returns to the earth.
Well, speaking about the body as being essentially dust. It was
Body.
created from dust, so even before it
Not
turns to
really
dust,
dust.
it's the dust returning to the. Well, yeah, eventually will decompose to fully turn to dust. Okay, so in any case, which in other words means, even when the body dies, there's still one last mitzvah the body must do. The soul must do. What's the final mitzvah that the soul gets to do? The mitzvah of burial. That's a mitzvah. That the soul returns its body back to God. The soul stays with the body for that final mitzvah. When that final mitzvah is done, then it untethers from the body and continues. Now, this is another element at play when we speak about the issue of donating a body or doing an autopsy. Are we delaying things? An autopsy, donating for medical research purposes, of course. Delaying things, it's indefinite. When is this ever going to be buried? We have no clue. That is obviously a very big violation of this principle. But even if we're doing an autopsy, then it starts becoming a question. Well, what if there's a very, very, very important reason to do this autopsy? Maybe it's worth delaying the burial for a day for this reason. So I'm not going to give you a conclusive answer for this, but I just want to show you how there's another element here at play which we have to consider as well. So here's the basic values we've learned about. Return to the deposit. When God reclaims the breath of life, we return the body to the place from which he fashioned the very first human being. And okay, let's now summarize. What are the issues with post-mortem procedures? And these are from the laws of burial. The entire body must be buried, and it must take place promptly. Okay, let us now wrap up the class. What would be the issues with any type of post-mortem procedures? These are the issues at play. And again, is there room for exceptions? The answer is yes. Depends which opinion we want to follow in this case. And there's also multiple things. So it's case by case. We have nothing conclusive, but at least we know what are the core issues on the table. According to Rabbi Ettlinger, the issue is consent. If we have consent, then there's a lot more latitude for any type of procedures post-mortem. According to Rabbi Landau, he doesn't care about consent. Rabbi Landau wants to look at, is it life-saving or not? Other issues, incomplete burial. We need all parts of the human body to be buried. That's another issue which could determine the law in any situation. And the last thing is delayed burial. The only way we could get out of the delay is it only going to be a very short delay. That gives us a lot more room to work with. Or if the deceased requests, that's another element over here. The wishes of the deceased could also, which I mentioned before, delaying for something which will bring honor or fulfill the wishes of the deceased is an element over here as well. Let's now wrap up. Let's go back to our original case study. Should unclaimed bodies be allowed, or Jewish law allow, to take unclaimed bodies to be used for anatomical dissection? That's very clear from today's class. No matter which opinion you want to go, no matter which way you want to spin it, there's a big fat no. Why not? It's very simple. Number one, Rabbi Ettlinger would tell you, there's no consent. You found this guy in the street corner, he was homeless. Somebody spoke to him about donating his body for it being studied for a year. There's no consent. Rabbi Landau would say, you're doing it for medical research, that's not a urgent life-saving reason. Continuing, there are parts of the body that will be left unburied if it's donated and the medical research being done, and there's a delay of the burials too long. Dear friends, it's 9:05. We've been learning about not the most pleasant topic today, but hopefully by learning about the sanctity of the body post-mortem, post-death, it helps give us a little bit more of an inspiration, of insight into the sanctity of our bodies, which we have right now. And it gives a whole new attitude to take care of our bodies by studying how Jewish law regards the body and the soul in death. We come to appreciate their sanctity in life. That's one of the core messages I want you to take from this course, is how precious our lives are from God's perspective, from a holy perspective, from a religious perspective. And I think that's one of the inspiring practical messages we could take.
Rabbi Elchanan Zon is an internationally recognized expert on Jewish afterlife care. He has directed the Jewish burial of Queens, New York for over 40 years and is the founding director of a national association that supports and guides rabbis and burial services across the U.S. Judaism considers post-mortem care an honorable duty, and Jewish burial societies are reverently called Chevra Kadisha, meaning the Holy Society.
The Chevra Kadisha is that organization in every Jewish community that deals with the people who die and sees that they are taken care of with the greatest respect. Throughout history, these people were the greatest people of their communities. The people involved in Chevra Kadisha were sometimes the rabbis and the greatest and most pious members of the community. The level of respect that will be accorded to this body if it is cared for by a Chevra Kadisha is on a very different level. The care is done with an understanding that the neshama is present. This is not just a body, this is a person. The soul is there, present with us, and concerned to see that its body is treated with care and with the proper tradition. We are all created in the image of God. We are a great being. We're greater than any other creature on earth. And as such, we are deserving of the kavod, of the respect that such a lofty creature requires. And to leave him unburied for any length of time desecrates the name of God. He or she represent the image of God. That is the reason the Torah provides for which we are to bury people and for which we are to bury them immediately. We bury treasure. We burn that which is disposable, that which is to be degraded, that which is to be destroyed. That is the respect that the Torah requires, and that is the only option that the Torah really offers for what we do with the disposition of human remains. The body's return to the earth is actually a form of kapara. It's a form of atonement. And that too gives the neshama, gives the soul, the ability to move on to its eternal place, maybe to a higher place. And that too is part of the importance of burial, which is really a gift. It's a gift that God gives us even after we die, allowing us to atone for our sins. We can no longer come to shul on Yom Kippur. We can no longer do mitzvahs. We can no longer give charity. But we can be buried, which in itself is a form of kapara, a form of atonement. What a phenomenal gift. My earliest recollection of death was as a child. There was a Jewish man, there was a landlord, and one of his tenants, who owed him a lot of rent, stabbed him to death. And so I remember as children gathering around this hole in the ground where the Chevra Kadisha with the Burial Society had dug up the earth that was drenched with his blood to bury in his grave. We will break up concrete. We will do anything that is necessary to bury someone. The stories of people in the Holocaust put their lives on the line to see that someone was buried, whether it was in the ghetto and they exposed themselves or whatever it might have been, at potential danger to their lives. Throughout our history, Fura, burial was so important. Look at what Israel will give up today for the body, not only of a soldier, but anybody. Look at what we would do just to bury blood or tissue that is found in a terrorist attack.
As mentioned, we have a breaking news story to tell you about. Apparently, a plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center here in New York City. It happened.
I remember 9/11. I remember being in the medical examiner's office the day after. We buried the bodies on condition that should other parts be found subsequently, they would be placed in their grave, and we would open the corner of the grave and bury them, sometimes 4 or 5 times. because every part of the human deserves respect and requires the privilege of burial, the respect that burial provides. I received a call from someone who told me that someone in his family lost a dear friend to a car accident. And it was now, I believe, about a year later, and this person suddenly had a dream where this friend who died came to him and said, "Why didn't you bury me?" And he woke up shaken up. The next night, it was a recurring dream, and the night after. And finally, he went to someone in his family who was a rabbi, and he asked him what to do. So the rabbi called me. "Rabbi, what do you think?" I said to him, "Only thing I can think of is anyone checked out the scene of the accident, in this case the car, to see, was everything buried, was everything removed?" Turned out this car was about to be crushed the next day. It had been held, it was part of a criminal case, and we sent down members of a Chevra Kadisha who cleaned the car, found pieces of bone and tissue and blood, and buried it, and the dream stopped.
Dear friends, with that, let us conclude this wonderful summer course. And I got to tell you, I was a little bit worried about this course because medical ethics, I know from trial and error, from experience, it doesn't sell well. It's not a well-selling course, and summer doesn't either sell well. But we're here, and I want to thank you all for joining us on this amazing journey. 4 short and sweet weeks. With this course, we conclude another wonderful year of learning. And I want to share with you what we got going on for the coming year ahead, God willing. Our next course in fall, that begins in November, right after the holidays, is called Nurturing Relationships. Jewish Wisdom for Building Deeper, Richer Connection in all of your relationships. This is accredited for doctors, all doctors, psychologists, and social workers, this course. Winter, Decoding the Talmud, inside the story, the substance, and the significance of the book that defines Judaism. And in the spring, colorful profiles of Jewish history. Short stories of extraordinary and unexpected characters from throughout Jewish history. So another amazing year of stuff. I had the honor of working on these 2 courses. So I could tell you that it's unbelievable stuff coming your way. And I look forward to many more happy and healthy times together, good Jewish learning. And I want to wish you all a wonderful year. We're coming soon to Rosh Hashanah. May you all be inscribed and sealed for a wonderful year ahead of growth and goodness and wealth, physically, materially, and spiritually. And may God bless you all. Thank you so much for joining. We'll see you all next time.